So, starting off, we're going to start with the topic. Basically, people saying pets will get returned if they are adopted through free means. And I'll let Jay, if you have any feedback on that question, I'll let you start it off.
For sure. I think that often, and just from the experience of watching the number of returns that we get, I can assure you that the fee that they paid originally is one of the lowest reasons why anyone would bring a pet back. More often, we're seeing errors of like matching with their lifestyle, of preparation, of access to resources. When we're waiving the fee, we typically make it easier for people to make room in their life to take in a pet, which will ultimately avoid some of the reasons that they bring them back. I think we definitely see more of a positive outcome in terms of waiving the fees and allowing that pet to like stay in their home.
Cassidy, have you ever seen this out in any other shelters where you might see any like backlash when it comes to free adoptions or anything like that on the internet?
Yeah, there's a lot of discourse on social media about it that I've seen. Sometimes in the comments of these posts that shelters make promoting their free adoption events, angry people get in the comments to talk about how free adoption events encourage the wrong kind of people to come and take animals, and they just kind of imagine all of these nightmare scenarios. Because we live in a society that so closely associates wealth with morality, so there's just this assumption that people that don't have endless supplies of money aren't good enough to have their own animals, and that's a debate that's happening a lot on social for sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I fully understand where you're coming from, and I think that that's kind of the root of the idea of waiving those fees and not discriminating in that particular way. Having a financial struggle and being a poor pet owner are not the same thing, and the root of the issue with, especially as it pertains to returns with fee waived adoptions, is more rooted in impulse. When there's a failure in like matchmaking and counseling, then that will cause that return versus the encouraging people to come in. Like removing a barrier to an adoption just gives us as a shelter an opportunity to truly make a better home. And we can usually avoid the true issue of impulse through our established system of like counseling and making sure that the match is good.
Completely agreed. With that, we'll move on to the next topic because I know that you are limited on time here. So the next myth is pets will end up in abusive homes.
I say we'd address that nearly the same way. As we're vetting our adopters, we spend time when like half an hour or so, like we're walking, we're talking with them, and we are taking that time as an adoption counselor to attest to who is this person in the time that I spend with them, what kind of home is this pet going to. Removing that barrier, again, like removing the barrier of their cost of entry to their home does not affect our ability to then vet that home for like safety and avoid sending pets into abusive situations.
I'm so curious about what the counseling session kind of sounds like. Do you have an example of a question you might ask?
Yeah. A very basic one that we start with typically is, so what kind of home are we living in, right? Just a general assessment of, are we in an apartment? Are we in a 4-bedroom? Do you live in like a McMansion? What does our living situation look like for our pet, right? Have we found access to crating? Do you tether? What are your we're asking questions about like their day-to-day life. Finding the times in your day. If you're taking home a very energetic baby, are you a very energetic person? You know what I mean? The more information that we have about the pet, the more that we can match it to the person. So typically the questions will be based on what pet are you interested in and what do they need, so that we can make sure that that's a good match.
It seems like such an important shift in perspective from what are the reasons that a pet wouldn't be successful in this environment to what resources can we give to this person to make sure that the pet that comes into their home is successful.
Exactly. And we even take it a step beyond that. We have a nonprofit called Pets for Life, where it's certain zip codes by limitations of donations, but we basically go door to door to see if people need any resources as far as pet food, leashes, anything like that. So that's there as resources for people that might adopt and still need help. But yeah, that's just some of the things that we do to kind of meet our community in the middle.
That's really exciting to hear, because sometimes I'll hear about shelters that have like low cost spay and neuter, or like pantries, food pantries, or that sort of thing. But they're not being promoted equally in all kinds of neighborhoods. So a lot of the times the people that need it the most are not, they just have no way of getting that information. So I really like the idea of bringing it right to the door and asking people what they need.
Yeah, I can't wait till the day I get to go out there with the team that goes door to door and record how the sessions go. But I agree. I thought that was very useful. As somebody that's been in a tough spot before, I have 2 pets, both adopted from LifeLine. So our next question is: dogs will be used for fighting operations.
So on that note, I think that I think I continue to echo back, and I think that genuinely the way that we address avoiding sending pets into dangerous situations, especially ones like fighting, is in our ability to vet their adopter, right? A lot of we have to take into account that when an adopter is attempting to take a pet for nefarious purposes, they will typically prefer to use nefarious means, right? They're going to deceive, they're going to mislead, right? And we have plenty of stopgaps that we use to avoid succumbing to those sorts of deceits, right? And just as a government entity, we do, our process is scrutinous in that way. We're taking IDs, we're confirming addresses and contact. If you're doing something illegal, you are going to want to avoid giving that information, which is naturally going to stop you from being able to progress down the adoption pathway, regardless of the fee that is in front of you, right? So we're doing our best each day just to make sure that the homes that we send these pets to are safe, loving, and kind. And if you cannot attest that your baby will not be in that sort of situation, it might not be the best time.
Again, it goes back to assigning or ascribing wealth to morality. Wanting a free adoption has very little to do with one's moral scruples, I guess. I really don't appreciate when people try to assume the worst of folks that don't have money, point blank period, and give the benefit of the doubt to people that do for some reason. But yeah, those things seem so unrelated to me.
Yeah, completely. And to that note, I do have some comments that I wanted to share with you guys from some of our posts. If you have any commentation after I read any of these, just raise your hand and you can just dive right in. But let's see. The first one is: when you make a free adoption, how do you ensure that the finances means to take care of the dog and provide medical care? In Los Angeles, we have seen so many tragedies happen when shelters do these free giveaways. Any comments?
Honestly, the best way that we can the best way that we can attest as a shelter to a family's financial preparedness to take on a pet is in their counseling. It is in asking them to attest to their own financial readiness, right? We only have so much access to our adopters' lives and their livelihood once they're out of the shelter. And the typical means that we go down by assessing, we are individually asking, are you prepared for this? When this emergency arises, what is your plan going forward, right? We give them access to as many free resources as we can, and we attempt to make the burden as little as possible. But we do depend on responsible adults to take on a personal endeavor that is going to require a financial input, and they are made very aware. And they're attesting to that readiness, and we are assessing how confident they are there, right? So it's just all in counseling and having a conversation about are you truly prepared for this going forward?
Yeah, that seems way more efficient than just asking whether or not someone has $400 right now. That does not give you a lot of information about what somebody's preparedness is going to be going forward. But asking questions about lifestyle and helping people formulate plans before they adopt the dog in case of financial emergency, being very transparent about how expensive it is to have a pet and having those conversations with people, that gives you more of the data that you need than, again, just having $400 right now.
On my end, I also feel like it might be to the level of what that specific person deems fit, as far as how much money, they might be the type of person to completely 100% spoil their pet in every way or aspect. Every pet parent, just like every parent to a child, is a different parent. But we all know that it doesn't take everything in the world to make a dog happy. It's the simple things to make a dog happy. As long as you love it and you treat it accurately, that's all that really matters. And that's what our pups need. When they get out of the shelter and they get that decompression moment and they realize that they're going to a home, it shouldn't be about money for me.
It won't be money for the pup.
We actually have some stats that says, I believe it's around 90-93% of pets actually remain in their home happily the next year. We often check on monthly, but we also do year check-ins through our email blasts. So majority of our pets stay with their families pretty much.
And that's 93% of pets adopted through free adoption or just any adoption? That's really good.
Yeah. So, I mean, if somebody bought a pet and returned it, that it has nothing to do with the price. Here's another comment. No, this is how dogs wind up in dog fighting rings. Please vet these people and make sure they have no criminal record involving animal abuse. Another person in the same thread followed up. Many times women will be used to adopt big dogs. Free is scary. They know how to fool people. So I know that we basically answered this already, but here I would like to talk more towards the fear of the people that are commenting these things. There just may be an era of just not, and there's a huge era of not understanding what it's like to work on the background of an animal shelter as well. But if you guys have any comments when it comes to the people that may be commenting these sort of comments, let me know.
Yeah, I think that those fears are naturally rooted in a little bit of bias, right? We all experience bias naturally just by the things we experience. They make it such that when you're viewing an experience like a free adoption, right, you see that it's a one less barrier between someone and this, innocent pet, right? Removing those barriers kind of comes twofold. It comes with, there are some risks involved, but I think that the flip side of that, removing those barriers, stopping ourselves from leaning into those biases and allowing us to be just generally less discriminatory when we are proving adoptions, when we're finding homes. It never hurts to make it easier for someone to adopt if you are still assuring that the adoption is well tended to, well cared for, and that it is being taken on not lightly, right? We're all in this to help these pets find good homes. That starts with finding more homes, and then vetting and making sure those homes are good. So I'm always about removing any barrier.
I think it's really interesting that someone in those comments would conflate accepting payment with vetting. As though if you are not accepting an adoption fee, that means you are not doing vetting. That's really weird, because getting money is not learning anything about an individual, which we already said. And two, I would say that there is more than a light air of racism in those kinds of comments, because we've already talked about how the society associates wealth with morality, but specifically in the United States, we live in a country that's built on racial capitalism. Wealth and income is heavily racially striated in this country. Just in general, white folks have more access to money, and then folks living below the poverty line are more often Black and brown. So conflating these groups with criminals, and again, criminality is also something heavily associated in this country with Blackness and brownness, thanks to mass incarceration and all sorts of other things. That definitely sounds an alarm in my ear that someone might have some anti-Blackness to work through, whether or not they realize.
Yeah, that's true.
And, if I may make a comment there, I genuinely believe that it is every individual's responsibility to check their own prejudices, and it is our responsibility as a company and as a life-saving institution to ensure that we don't allow our personal prejudices to affect the livelihood of our pets, right? So we always have to be checking with ourselves to say, am I not giving this pet a home because of my personal discomfort, or is this truly an assessment of the pet's safety and health?
That's very true. That's a very good angle to think about it as, because we also very directly impact animals leaving. Let's see if there's any more comments. I don't think so. It's more of the same, so I'll go to the next topic. Let's see, and this is our last myth. So, pets will not be provided quality care if their owner didn't pay a fee to adopt. And we've discussed that pretty much through answering these questions here. So, if you guys want to touch on that, that's completely fine. If you have just any open statements about free adoptions, any questions that we didn't ask or didn't bring into the conversation, let me know. We have about 6 minutes.
I just had a little anecdote that I think is very relevant there. More often than not, when we do waive the adoption fees for adopters, the first comment that I get is, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna hit the Petco then." They are saying, this little bit of money that you've saved me, that I had already intended on spending, that I had already prepared, I can actually now use this to care for my pet. There's a direct correlation to when we are able to make a way for our adopters, that they are more able to make a way for their pets. Exactly. So I just think that's silly. It's a silly idea to think that saving an adopter money will stop them from properly being able to care for their pet.
Agreed.
And there is a much larger conversation to be had about what folks consider quality pet care. The standards for some folks are really high, and I feel like the standards for some folks get away from the actual needs of the dog in front of them. This dog needs somebody who is willing to take them outside and make sure they get 30 minutes of exercise, or make sure that they get a a quality kibble, which doesn't mean a boutique kibble or like a service that you have to spend hundreds of dollars a month. But there are quality kibbles that are affordable. So yeah, we just have to stop associating wealth with goodness. And quality care does not have to be expensive, especially if it's just based in love for the animal in front of you.
Agreed.
I agree.